Chapter 331. She remembered the night before their engagement, when he had told her that he would have had a sister. When he said those words, his expression was somewhat disappointed, but also somewhat angry. This anger came from Zhaoke. Pei-Chi-Chi smiled and looked up. She held the beer can against the strong wind. Tang Yu, Happy New Year. She drank a lot of beer and got drunk. She sat there and smiled foolishly. She watched Sun Feifei perform on the big screen with tears in her eyes. But where was Tang Yu? Why didn't he appear again? Pei-Chi-Chi felt dizzy and smiled foolishly. It was Lunar New Year's Eve. She had never spent Lunar New Year's Eve with Tang Yu. Previously, she had thought that she would spend Lunar New Year's Eve with him for the rest of her life. When she was young, when she was middle-aged, and when she was old, they would always be together. She finished the beer that she brought and was drunk. She was surrounded by Tang Yu's shadow. She stood on the empty square and screamed like a lunatic. Tang Yu, Tang Yu. But where was he? She stood there alone. It was as if she was the only one left in the whole world. Those whom she cared about, those who cared about her, had left her. Dad, Qin Xinjia, Jinrong, Tang Yu. She hugged her body and squatted down slowly. Her little face was calm as if she had fallen asleep. After a while, she suddenly stood up and started to dance on the square, just like that night when she danced with Tang Yu. Pei-Chi-Chi jumped, spun, and spun tirelessly. She felt dizzy, but she felt much better. It was only in this half-awake, half-asleep state that he was still hers. She didn't know if she was the one who made the sound. It was hoarse and powerful, echoing continuously between the buildings. Tang Yu belonged to Pei-Chi-Chi. One sound after another. She stood there and smiled foolishly. She muttered, "Tang Yu is mine." Tang Yu stood a distance away and looked at her quietly. Pei-Chi-Chi, you coward. Beside him was the building's security guard. He looked at Pei-Chi-Chi with some difficulty. Such a ruckus could be considered as disturbing the residents, right? But looking at the CEO's expression, he seemed pretty happy. Wasn't the president supposed to be at Sun Feifei's concert? Why did he come here to see Miss Pei get drunk? It was Miss Pei who told the president that she was coming. Good heavens! Good heavens! The security guard's eyes widened as he watched Pei-Chi-Chi smash the huge LCD screen in front of Sheng Yuan with something unknown. A shattering sound was heard. Then, Tang Yu quickly ran over and hugged Pei-Chi-Chi, bringing her away from there. Sparks flew everywhere. Sheng Yuan's sign fell. Sheng Yuan's sign was smashed. Sheng Yuan's sign fell, however. Tang Yu was smiling happily. He hugged the drunk murderer in the winter night and buried his face in her little neck. Because he had drunk wine, it was very warm. Little liar, he said angrily. He said angrily. Then, he moved his face and moved his lips from her cheek to her lips. Even though the weather was very cold, the temperature of their bodies was extremely high. Pei-Chi-Chi was drunk. She was in a daze as he hugged her and kissed her. It was a little unreal. Her little hand was raised high and landed on his face. He quickly caught her hand and wrapped it around his neck. I must be dreaming, she murmured. Tang Yu was panting, but he was still hugging her. Then, he raised his head and looked at Sheng Yuan's screen. Chapter 332. He felt angry and amused at the same time. He really didn't know what to do with her. Stroking her fluffy hair, he pressed her into his embrace and said in a low voice, "It's a dream. Chi-Chi, let's go home. Okay? Go home?" She raised her head and stared at him with her black and white eyes. She looked exceptionally seductive. Tang Yu exhaled with difficulty. Okay, let's go home. He squatted down slightly. Pei-Chi-Chi was stunned for a moment before she lay on his back. Her little hands hugged his neck so tightly that she almost broke his neck. Tang Yu stood up straight and looked at the night sky. Then, he pressed his hands on her thighs and walked forward. Pei-Chi-Chi, can you still say that you don't love me? Can you still say that you don't care? Can you still say that you only have Jinrong in your heart? Little liar. This time, I'll let you say it yourself. She was drunk and thought that it was a dream, so she boldly pressed her face against his back. Her little hands restlessly unbuttoned 2 buttons on his shirt and reached in for warmth. Tang Yu froze for a moment and hit her but angrily. She moaned in pain, and that was too much. He pursed his lips. He wanted to be stricter, but the corners of his lips still couldn't help but curve up. Ching-chung was right. He had been poisoned by Pei Chi-Chi's chicken soup. On New Year's Eve, the gentle snow drifted down from the dark sky, adding some warmth to the winter night. Recently, it had always been snowing, but it just didn't pile up. Tang Yu carried Pei Chi-Chi and walked further and further away. Meanwhile, the security personnel were busy at work. Sheng Yuan was smashed, and the CEO ran away with the murderer on his back. What was going on? Pei Chi-Chi lay on Tang Yu's back and began to sing. Her singing was terrible, but fortunately, Tang Yu did not mind. Two tigers, run fast, run fast. She sang into his ear, and when she was done, she gave him a small bite. Tang Yu, is my singing better? Or is Sun Feifei's playing better? You sing well. He lied through his teeth. She giggled behind him and put her arms around his neck. I knew you wouldn't like her, she said softly like a little girl. Yes, I only like you. His voice was gentler than the night and the snow. As he spoke, he tilted his head and asked the little fellow behind him, What about you? Do you like me? I like it. She hugged him tightly and buried her face in the back of his neck. Don't tell anyone, especially Tang Yu. Tang Yu's heart seemed to have been struck by something, as if a strong electric current had passed through his body. The electric current made him numb, and his heart was also soft and sour. Chi-Chi, who am I? His voice was hoarse. At this moment, a few snowflakes fell on the back of his neck. Pei Chi-Chi leaned over and sucked on the snowflakes. When her hot little mouth was on his neck, his body trembled, and he almost could not control himself. Of course, Pei Chi-Chi felt it. She giggled, and her little mouth did not stop kissing here and there. He exhaled a heavy and difficult breath to make sure that she was really drunk. He asked again in a hoarse voice, Chi-Chi, who am I? Daddy. She hugged him very affectionately. On the other hand, Tang Yu's face darkened. Did she think that he was Pei Mingi? How could she kiss Pei Mingi like that? His face was completely dark, but she buried her whole face on his back. Daddy Tang Yu. Chapter 333. Tang Yu turned his head sideways and used one hand to pull her little head over and kiss her fiercely. She struggled on the back, but she could not break free. She was in a mess, and her neck was in pain. He also knew that he was being impulsive. Many people were looking at them like that. He finally had enough kissing. He patted her fluffy little head as a compliment, as if he was treating a little pet. The snow was getting heavier and heavier. Tang Yu put her down, took off his coat and wrapped it around her, and carried her on his back again. It was not that they could not take the car, but he wanted to carry her on his back and continue walking. Pei Chi-Chi was a little sleepy on his back, but she could not bear to sleep, so she lay on his back and sang. Every song was unpleasant to listen to, but Tang Yu liked it very much. Our Chi-Chi sings really well. He smiled and carried the little one on his back very lightly. After walking for 2 hours, they finally arrived at her apartment. After putting her down, Pei Chi-Chi blocked the door, and her little hand gently scratched his chest. She was drunk and her eyes were hazy. This is my home. Tang Yu, shouldn't you be accompanying your fiancé? Her expression was very childish, but her actions were a little seductive. Tang Yu stared at her and smiled faintly. Chi-Chi, have you forgotten that you are the one dreaming now? Dreaming? Yes. She was indeed dreaming. Pei Chi-Chi looked at Tang Yu. Her gaze was fixated on him, like a little wolf looking at a meat bone. Tang Yu smiled faintly, and his hand was holding his coat. He said softly, Chi-Chi, open the door. She then rummaged through her pocket, but she could not find the key. At that moment, Tang Yu's heart was breaking down. Imagine a man who had endured for 2 hours, and when he reached the door, he did not have the key. He suddenly pulled her into his arms and kissed her passionately. She was barely breathing in his arms, and her little face was burning hot. The coldness outside had suddenly disappeared, and even the thin layer of snow on her clothes had become boiling hot. Tang Yu hugged her with one arm and buried her face in his chest. Then, he kicked her hard. The door opened. An innocent door. They stumbled into the room, kissing and kissing, and the door was kicked shut. Pei Chi was pressed down on the sofa and kissed. She sat in his arms, looking a mess. Her hair was all over the place, and her coat had been tossed aside, folded together with his coat. It was even wrapped around his shirt. She looked so messy, her hand pressed against his scalp. She felt as if she was standing in the clouds and was in a daze. Too much alcohol made her unable to tell if this was a dream or reality. Let's just treat it as a dream. She was drunk. As the kiss deepened, Tang Yu could no longer control himself. He exhaled deeply. Chi, who am I? Daddy. She buried her face in his chest and nibbled on him. If he continued to tolerate it, he would not be a man. He carried her into the bathroom. Pei Chi was tortured to the point where she wished she was dead, but he still continued to ask, "Do you like Jinro?" He held her little face and asked harshly. That little woman nodded her head in a silly manner. Yes, she used to like him. She was quite honest. Tang Yu was about to go mad with anger. She was really honest, and he hit her hard with his big hand. Chapter 334. Pei Chi looked at him and swallowed her saliva. You look delicious. Tang Yu pursed his thin lips slightly and watched as she slowly squatted down. He had never known that Pei Chi had such a hobby. However, such a hobby was the best thing for a man. He pulled her fluffy hair. It was a little painful, but more than that, he was happy. On New Year's Eve, the fireworks outside rose one by one into the night sky and blossomed on the gorgeous black silk curtain. They were like two fishes, entangled with each other. This was probably what the ancients meant by the joy of fish in water. Tang Yu seemed like he didn't know what fatigue was, and Pei Chi looked like she didn't know what to eat next. Time was weary, but both of them were willing. When Pei Chi woke up, it was already 10:00 in the morning. When she got up, her body felt like it had been run over by a truck, and her head hurt. She held her forehead and looked around. There was nothing different. It was her bedroom, and everything was clean. Even she was wearing a set of pajamas. Did she drink too much? But in her mind, she vaguely remembered that she seemed to be with Tang Yu. It must be a hallucination. She lifted the blanket and got out of bed. She couldn't remember how she came back. When she walked to the bathroom to brush her teeth, her pajamas slid down. Her skin was fair and delicate, and there was no sign of being touched. However, Pei Chi still felt that her body was a little strange. As for what this strange feeling was, she couldn't explain it. She only felt a little tired and sore. What was more frightening was that her lips were a little numb, as if she had eaten something for a long time. She flipped through it carefully, and suddenly, a lot of unhealthy images flashed in her mind. In the misty bathroom, she knelt in front of Tang Yu, looking up at him. Pei Chi's eyes widened. She couldn't believe that she had really done this. She didn't rinse the toothpaste properly. She looked around the house and went to the bathroom to take a closer look, but she couldn't find anything. She bit her lips and covered her face. Maybe she really had a dream. When she went downstairs, her car was no longer there. She hailed a cab and headed to Shengyuan building. She saw her car there, but it was wrecked. She didn't know which brat had used paint to paint her car. Love, it's so full that I can't wipe it off. Pei Chi looked around and saw that the murderer was long gone. A short video was playing on Sheng Yuan's gigantic screen. She widened her eyes. It was actually Tang Yu. He leaned against the railing of the courtyard. He was wearing a gray sweater and looked very homey. He held a glass of red wine in his hand and said a few words of blessing with a smile. That short video kept repeating itself. Pei Chi's eyes felt a little hot. Was it because he was with Sun Feifei last night that he was in such a good mood? Pei Chi didn't know how long she watched it. Then, she kicked the car hard, and the car started to scream. She bit her lip and opened the car door. She drove the car through the streets, and it was quite eye-catching. She looked for a car wash, but after looking at it, they said that it couldn't be washed off and would have to be repainted. It was Chinese New Year, and the 4S store was probably closed. Moreover, she needed a car. She decided to bear with it. She drove around again. Since it was Chinese New Year, there weren't many people around. Chapter 335. As she drove, she started to feel a little lonely. Pei Chi wanted to go to the hospital to see Jinrong, but the nurse said that the Lins had taken Jinrong home. She stood at the entrance of the nursing home for a long time. Perhaps she would never see Jinrong in this lifetime. Later, she parked her car in the parking lot of the shopping mall and walked around. Only by walking nonstop would she not feel that the new year was so cold and cheerless. The LCD screens in the shopping mall were all playing Tang Yu's short videos. It was simply crazy. Pei Chi felt that he was everywhere. At a restaurant on the first floor, Pei Chi met Pei Huan. Standing outside the restaurant, she was hesitating about whether she should go in to eat when she saw Pei Huan. Pei Huan was with a middle-aged man. That man looked quite decent, good-looking, and had good taste. It was just that at this age, he was old enough to be Pei Huan's uncle, and it could be imagined that he had a family. Pei Chi had never thought that the arrogant Pei Huan would go down this path. She was a little stunned and stood there for a long time without being able to move away. At this moment, Pei Huan saw her and leaned over to say something to the man beside her. The man turned his head and saw Pei Chi. He smiled and got up to leave. Pei Huan waved at Pei Chi. Pei Chi hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open and walking in. The waiter enthusiastically recommended her. Pei Chi said indifferently, "I have an appointment." She walked straight to Pei Huan and sat down opposite her. For a long time, the two of them looked at each other without saying a word. Finally, Pei Huan chuckled. "Long time no see." Pei Chi pursed her lips. "Yes, long time no see." Pei Huan supported her chin with her beautiful hand and smiled. "Pei Chi, are you going to ask me who the man was just now? All right then, who is that man?" Pei Chi was expressionless. Pei Huan's smile was a little charming, which did not match her age. She played with the wine glass in one hand and spat out 2 words from her red lips. "Godfather." Pei Chi remained silent. "Pei Chi, you are a pure girl from the Pei family. Don't tell me you don't know what a godfather means." Pei Huan smiled like a cat. "It means that you are my father in the day, and you can do whatever you want at night." She smiled and became a little annoyed. She waved at the waiter and ordered a few expensive dishes. Then she looked at Pei Chi and said, "See? Even without the Pei family and the Lin family, I was still living a good life. Pei Chi, what you have, I have. What you don't have, I also have." As she spoke, she took out a long and thin cigarette from her bag, lit it skillfully, and puffed out a cloud of smoke. This reminded Pei Chi of Zhao. Zhao was also like this. She could smoke very seductively. "You must have had a hard time without Tang Yu, right?" "I also saw that Tang Yu has a new girlfriend, and she looks pretty good." Pei Huan felt a little happy in his heart. "Why are you looking at me like that? Do you think that I have fallen?" "Pei Chi, stop it. We sell it all the same." Pei Chi looked down and smiled. "Yes, it's the same. It's the same. Try smoking. After smoking, you will forget Lin Jinrong, forget Tang Yu, and forget everything about the Pei family." Pei Huan stared at Pei Chi with her slender eyes. She leaned forward and put the cigarette, but in front of Pei Chi. Pei Chi felt choked. Chapter 336. Pei Chi was shocked. "So what? Pei Chi, do you still think you're that spotless little saint from before? Without Tang Yu, you're just a piece of meat on the cutting board. When those men want to eat you up, you won't be able to escape." Pei Huan sneered as she put the cigarette to her lips. Pei Chi only felt sorry for her. "All right, I'm in a good mood today. Let's have a meal together. Speaking of which, we're considered a family." Pei Huan put out the cigarette. "Let's eat. It's quite pitiful to see you alone." Only Pei Chi's loneliness could comfort her. It made her feel that she, Pei Huan, was not the most pitiful one. She, Pei Chi, had fallen in love with Tang Yu, but she was also abandoned. Pei Huan looked as if she had seen through the world. She pointed out, "Men are all the same. They only covet your young body. When they pamper you, you're a baby. When they're done playing with you, you're nothing." Pei Chi remained silent. She only felt that Pei Huan had changed a lot. "Do you know? I'm in the entertainment industry now. That man just now is the vice president of King Entertainment. He can make me famous." Pei Huan said nonchalantly. I just need to sleep with him. Really? Pei Chi stared into her eyes. Is that what you want? What about your love for Jinrong? Pei Huan's eyes were originally smiling, but now they became a little sharp. Love? Pei Chi, don't be funny. I love him, but does he love me? He gave you his heart and his life. What did he leave for me? A child? I'm so young. Am I supposed to watch over him for the rest of my life? What if Jinrong wakes up one day? Pei Chi closed her eyes. Pei Huan, won't you regret it then? Pei Huan was stunned for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. How is that possible? He won't wake up. With that said, she chuckled. So what if he's awake? He still likes you. And that man just now, he can give me happiness. Being with him, I can taste the happiness of a woman, instead of being a widow with Lin Jinrong. Pei Chi, do you know what it feels like to be a widow? Do you know how it feels to be left out by your husband? Don't you know that Lin Jinrong only touched me once? Isn't that ironic? Pei Huan raised her head. From the moment I aborted the child, I told myself that I would never love him again. Pei Chi was speechless. She and Pei Huan sat face to face and ordered a table full of dishes, but neither of them touched anything. Before leaving, Pei Huan said, Pei Chi, the hatred between the two of us will never be resolved in this lifetime. Pei Chi looked at the boundless night and smiled faintly. Pei Huan, you could have lived another life. She was the one who had cut off her own path. It was her willfulness that had caused her to live such a miserable life. When Pei Huan went out to get her car, she saw a car that had been sprayed messily. It was written all over in English. As she looked at it, her eyes felt a little warm, because it was all written with the word love. However, when she saw what was inside, it turned out to be Pei Chi's car. Then, Pei Huan's gaze froze. Slowly, bitterly, she smiled. Pei Chi, you're such a fool. You actually don't know how much Tangyu loves you. On the chassis of the car, there were two inconspicuous English letters, Ty. Pei Chi, I won't tell you. Just let you struggle. Pei Huan raised her head and there were some tears in her eyes. Chapter 337. Pei Chi sat there for a long time. So long that the waiter asked her softly, Miss, do you need a takeaway? She turned her head and looked at the waiter, her gaze a little dazed. Miss, do you need a takeaway? The waiter was especially patient when faced with such a beautiful girl. Pei Chi pursed her lips, looked at the dishes that had not been touched, and said calmly, Take it to the takeaway. Although she was very hungry, she did not have much of an appetite after meeting Pei Huan. Although she did not like Pei Huan, and just as Pei Huan had said, the hatred would never be resolved in this lifetime, Pei Huan was still her father's child. No matter how ruthless Pei Chi was, she still felt a little pity for Pei Huan. She walked out with the lunchbox and did not get her car. Instead, she wandered on the streets. Behind her, there seemed to be someone following her. When Pei Chi turned around, the person was gone. After walking 2 streets, Pei Chi placed the lunchbox on a platform in a green belt and continued to walk forward. She walked to the corner and stopped. She looked in that direction. A woman with a little girl walked over quietly and picked up the lunchbox. The woman was wearing very old clothes, and so was the little girl. At this moment, the woman opened the lunchbox and carefully fed the food inside to the little girl. Probably because she had never eaten such delicious food before, the little girl ate in a hurry, and the woman was a little anxious. Pei Chi looked from afar and saw a small car next to the woman. There were some purified water bottles on it. The little girl had probably been exposed to the elements for a long time. Her skin was a little dark, and her eyes were even more distinct. As she ate, she looked up and saw Pei Chi. Pei Chi pursed her lips and smiled warmly at her. Then, she gestured for her to wait there. Pei Chi quickly ran to the mall and bought a beautiful rabbit the size of a child. She took out her card and withdrew about 100,000 yuan from all the teller machines. It was packed thickly in a bag and carefully wrapped in another layer. She ran out, but the little girl was still standing there, waiting for her. Pei Chi slowed down and ran over again. She stuffed the soft rabbit and the heavy bag into the little girl's arms. She said in a low voice, Happy New Year. The little girl's face was red. Pei Chi reached out and patted her head. You have to listen to your mother. The woman at the side stood far away. After Pei Chi left, she walked over and opened the things in her daughter's arms. She was shocked to see that it was a neatly tied-up bag of money. There were about 100,000 yuan in it. He couldn't accept it, but if he searched everywhere, where would he find Pei Chi? Mommy. The little girl hugged the rabbit and said softly, Mommy, can we rest today? The woman hugged her child tightly. Her lips were dry and cracked, but she still kissed her daughter solemnly. All right, Mommy will rest for a day. Now, I'll take Ruoro to buy some new clothes. After they left, Pei Chi walked out from behind. She was a little jealous and envious. She had never been hugged by any woman before, and she didn't know what it felt like. She had only been hugged by Tang Yu. Chapter 338. She looked down and saw that it was a call from Tang Xian. After some thought, she picked it up. Tang Xian said in a sobbing voice, Chi, my dad and mom are fighting. They're so fierce. They had fought before, but not like today. Pei Chi was stunned. Tang Xian continued, I heard that dad slapped mom a few times because of some photo. Chi, dad has never hit mom like that before. Pei Chi was speechless. She didn't want to get involved in Zhaoke's affairs. Chi, can you bring me to your place for a few days? Tang Xian begged. Afraid that she wouldn't agree, she quickly said, brother has to stay with auntie. Besides, he has a girlfriend now. Tang Xian stopped. She knew that she had said the wrong thing. Pei Chi didn't mind. She smiled faintly. What if your dad and mom are worried? Tang Xian pretended to be indifferent. It's fine. I'll tell them that I'm at my brother's place. It's not like this hasn't happened before. They can't control me when they fight. Pei Chi sighed. In the end, she agreed. Maybe it was loneliness. She went to get her car and drove to Yanhui, where she had arranged to meet Tang Xian. Yanhui. Tang Xian packed a small bag and carefully walked down the stairs. She didn't want Tang Ziyuan and Zhao Ku to see her. Tang Ziyuan's eyes were bloodshot. He grabbed Zhao Ku's hair and forced her to look up. Look carefully. The photo is not of you. Who is it? Zhao Ku swallowed hard and didn't dare to make a sound. She saw a photo of herself lying on the bed. She was naked and only wrapped in a bath towel. Her face was a little blurry, but those who knew her could tell that it was her. This photo was published in the entertainment headlines today. Tang Ziyuan was also a person who liked to read entertainment news. When he saw it, he slapped Zhao Ku a few times. He was still angry. He, Tang Ziyuan, was a respectable man. Although he knew that Zhao Ku was a little unbearable in the past and had been with a few men, he didn't care because he didn't love her. Now that she had Tang Xian and her beauty, all she had to do was to behave herself. Moreover, even if she was cheating on him, as long as she didn't embarrass herself, he wouldn't care. They had been together for a long time, but now, he had caused such a huge commotion. Would he still have any face left in the future? Tang Ziyuan pressed Zhao Ku's head to the front of the newspaper and let her read it herself. Zhao Ku's hair was in a mess. She looked like a crazy woman, her lips trembling as she looked at the photo. She recognized it. It was the place where she and Ronglei had their rendezvous. This photo should be several years old. This bastard. Last time, he said he would delete all the photos. Just because he had asked her for 1 million 2 days ago, and she had refused to give it to him, he had set her up like this. Zhao Ku gritted her teeth. Ziyuan, this is all in the past. It's not like you don't know. Tang Ziyuan slapped him again. Things from the past? Zhao Ku, do you think I'm stupid? Isn't the ring on your finger a wedding ring? Zhao Ku couldn't deny it anymore. Chapter 339. Zhao Ku knew that Tang Ziyuan cared about Tang Xian, but he cared more about his reputation. Even if she didn't die this time, she would lose a layer of skin. She couldn't live without the title of Mrs. Tang. She didn't want to live the life she had before. Thinking of those days, thinking of the gray walls, the worn-out furniture, and the dirty man, it was even worse than killing Zhao Ku. She knelt in front of Tang Ziyuan and confessed, Ziyuan, I was wrong. I promise that I will never see him again, and I will never have these pictures again. Tang Ziyuan grabbed her hair and lifted her in front of him. He narrowed his eyes and looked at her. Suddenly, he threw her away. You're on your own. Zhao lay on the ground and didn't get up for a long time. She just coughed. After a long time, she pushed herself up and walked to Tang Xian's room. But it was empty. What about Tang Xian? Where did she go? Zhao heart was in a mess. Tang Ziyuan didn't divorce her because of Tang Xian. Otherwise, he would have insisted on remarrying Lin Yun last time. So, she wanted to hold on to her daughter tightly. As long as Tang Xian was there and Tang Xian called him daddy, Tang Ziyuan wouldn't bear to divorce her. Zhao looked for Tang Xian like a madwoman. She called her number, but it was turned off. Finally, she called Tang Yu. Tang Yu was surprised to receive her call. He looked at his mother without batting an eyelid, then walked outside and said, "Wait a moment, I'll send someone to take a look." In the past, when Tang Xian ran away from home, she would go to Xia City. But now that he didn't live in Xia City, Tang Xian naturally wouldn't go there. He hung up, thought for a moment, and dialed Pei Chi-Chi's number. When Pei Chi-Chi picked up the phone, she saw Tang Xian running towards her. She looked at the number and answered, "Hello?" Tang Yu's voice was especially cold. "Is Tang Xian with you?" Pei Chi-Chi saw that Tang Xian had opened the car door and was sitting beside her. "Yes, she's with me." Tang Yu was silent for a moment. "Got it." He hung up the phone with just 3 words. Pei Chi-Chi looked at the phone, not sure what he meant. Got it? So he didn't want her to send Tang Xian back? He put down his phone and looked at Tang Xian. Tang Xian's hands were clasped together, as if she was trying to please him. "Your brother is calling." Pei Chi-Chi asked, "Do you want me to send you to him?" "It's okay." Tang Xian said anxiously, "Big brother is always with Auntie during the New Year. Auntie won't be happy if I go." Pei Chi-Chi looked at her and didn't say anything. She started the car. Tang Xian immediately buckled her seatbelt and said fawningly, "Chi-Chi, your car film looks really cool. Where did you put it?" "It was scribbled on, not pasted." Pei Chi-Chi glanced at her. "Aren't you afraid that your parents will be worried?" Xian played with Xian looked down. "They can't, Chang's Shan. Tang can't do it. Can you let me stay with you for a few days?" She begged Pei Chi-Chi. Pei Chi-Chi pursed her lips and didn't say anything. She drove back to where she lived. When the car stopped, Tang Xian was sure that she was safe. She sat still and said softly, "What did brother say?" Chapter 340. Pei Chi-Chi glanced at her. "Nothing. So I can stay with you?" Tang Xian asked carefully. Pei Chi-Chi saw many little stars in her eyes, and a sense of kinship rose in her heart. She thought that with Zhao around, she wouldn't have too many feelings for Tang Xian. But Tang Xian was different. She was as weak as a small animal, which made people want to love her. Pei Chi-Chi reached out and gently touched Tang Xian's little head. "It should be fine for now." Tang Xian was satisfied even if it was for now. She opened the car door and hopped out. Then, she took out her phone and took selfies with Pei Chi-Chi's car. But she also saw that her mother had called. Tang Xian chose to ignore it. When Pei Chi-Chi walked over, Tang Xian put away her phone. "Chi-Chi, I've posted it on my friend circle. Don't worry, I blocked it. She won't be able to see it." Pei Chi-Chi was annoyed and amused at the sight of her trying to please her. She brought her to her apartment and settled her down. When she pushed the door open, Tang Xian cheered and jumped on the sofa with all her might. She had never been so wild before, and her pale face was flushed. Pei Chi-Chi brought her bag into the guest room. When she came out, Tang Xian was lying on the sofa and said softly, "I like this sofa the most. It's so comfortable." Pei Chi-Chi shook her head and walked into the kitchen. Then, she came out again. "Tang Xian, I'm going to the supermarket to buy some ingredients. Are you coming with me or staying at home?" Tang Xian jumped up. "Of course I'm going with you." When she got into the car again, Tang Xian lowered her head and played with her phone. She saw a comment from Tang Yu in her friend circle. "Where is it?" Tang Xian stole a glance at Chi-Chi. Seeing that she was focused on driving, she sent a private message to Tang Yu. "I'm going to the supermarket with Chi-Chi. Chi-Chi wants to cook for me." After she sent the message, She waited for a long time, but nothing happened. Really, there was no reaction at all. She thought that her brother loved Chi-Chi so much that he couldn't forget her. It turned out that when there was a new person, they would forget the old one. How was that Sun Fei better than Chi-Chi? She was beautiful, but she was like a wooden beauty. She couldn't be compared to her Chi-Chi. Tang Xian pouted and did not say anything. She was a little disappointed. Actually, she wanted to call her brother over. She hoped that her brother and Chi-Chi could be together. After all, Tang Xian was still a child. She couldn't keep her thoughts to herself. After a while, she asked pitifully, Chi-Chi, do you really not like my brother? Pei Chi-Chi did not reply. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel. Tang Xian, don't ask questions like that again. Your brother has a girlfriend now. It'll be bad if you misunderstand. Tang Xian buried her head and looked outside, sighing, Chi-Chi, if I were you, I'd definitely like my brother. In Tang Xian's heart, Tang Yu was the embodiment of perfection. Pei Chi-Chi smiled and did not say anything. Tang Xian looked out of the window and suddenly felt a little sad. She saw Chi-Chi and her brother together. How loving they were. Could it be that none of this was true? If that was not true, then what was true? But no one could answer Tang Xian's question. She could only look outside. Chapter 341. Pei Chi-Chi brought Tang Xian to the supermarket. For the first time, Tang Xian felt that it was a fresh experience. She even asked Pei Chi-Chi to push her in a small cart as if she was a child. Pei Chi-Chi pinched her little face and agreed in the end. Tang Xian stood in the cart and ordered. She shouted excitedly, Chi-Chi, go over there and have a look. Look at the chilies there. They look so pretty. You know they are chilies. Pei Chi-Chi smiled and took a box. She then picked some seafood, meat, and vegetables. Tang Xian's mouth watered. Chi-Chi, are you really going to cook for me? Tang Xian whispered. Pei Chi-Chi nodded and focused on picking. She even bought some daily necessities for Tang Xian. Tang Xian was still a child. She was forced to use the Princess series in the past. She was already tired of looking at the pink ones. She picked some cartoon ones to her heart's content. Her favorite was the bunny one. Pei Chi-Chi satisfied her. She was a child after all. For some reason, Pei Chi-Chi's heart softened when she saw Tang Xian's happy face. If she was happy, he would be happy as well. She shook her head and laughed at herself. She pushed Tang Xian to the living area. When she was about to pick a pair of slippers, she saw someone she shouldn't have seen. Tang Yu and Sun Fei were there too. Sun Fei's fingers were clasped on Tang Yu's arm. She was holding a pair of pink slippers in her hand. She was looking up and talking to Tang Yu as if she was asking for his opinion. Pei Chi-Chi stopped in her tracks. Tang Xian called out to her brother, but she acted as if she didn't see Sun Fei. Tang Yu looked over. He glanced at Pei Chi-Chi's face and finally at Tang Xian. He asked calmly, why did you come out? Tang Xian was a little angry. In the past, when Chi-Chi was with her brother, she would throw herself at him. No matter if it was Chi-Chi or her brother, she would always be able to hug one of them. But now, Sun Fei was clinging to her brother like an octopus. I want to celebrate the new year with Chi-Chi. Tang Xian pouted. Chi-Chi has no one by her side. I have to accompany her. She was angry at Tang Yu too. Brother, you should accompany the others. I'll be fine with Chi-Chi. In the past, if she was angry, Tang Yu would coax her. But this time, Tang Yu actually nodded. That's good too. I'll pick you up. Also, I told your mother that you'll be with me. Xian, was Xian's words. Tang Xian had failed to achieve her goal, so she bit her lips and sulked. Pei Chi-Chi's gaze was somewhat dazed. She kept staring at him, forgetting the existence of her surroundings. Tang Yu acted as if he didn't see Pei Chi-Chi. He looked at the slippers in Sun Fei's hands and said indifferently, I'll take this pair. The two of them left. Tang Xian was annoyed. Chi-Chi, forget it. I'll find a better man than my brother. When the two of them left, Tang Xian was annoyed by their lovey-dovey display. Chi-Chi, forget it. I'll find a better man than my brother. They left. Tang Xian was annoyed by their love. Chi-Chi, forget it. Find a better man than my brother. In this city, she might see them often. She thought she should get used to it. But when they reached the checkout area, Pei Chi still wasn't used to it. She bumped into Tang Yu and Sun Feifei. They seemed to be waiting for the checkout. Sun Feifei stood in front of Tang Yu. Tang Yu put one hand on her waist, and the other hand reached for 2 boxes. Chapter 342. Pei Chi was even more dazed. She stared at the things in his hands and did not come back to her senses for a long time. Although she knew that he and Sun Feifei would get together sooner or later, she did not expect it to be so soon. Her heart ached, but there was another voice that said to her, Pei Chi, isn't this your own choice? Yes, it was her own choice. She looked down and did not want to look at it. After she paid and took the things down, Tang Xine walked beside her in silence. Obviously, Tang Xine saw it too. Chi. Tang Xine called her softly and pulled her sleeve. Pei Chi forced a smile. It's okay. She carried the things and walked straight ahead. Tang Xine followed behind with her mouth agape. Then, she covered her eyes. With a thud, Pei Chi bumped into a human wall, and the voice that greeted him was one that he could not be more familiar with. She looked up and saw his handsome face, his handsome chin, his strong Adam's apple, and the hickeys on it. Hickeys? Something flashed in Pei Chi's mind. She seemed to remember something. She remembered that ball of heat that was like a raging fire. However, she immediately felt sad. It was left by Sun Feifei. She was a little dazed. She could not move her eyes away and her body did not move. Only she knew that her legs were weak. She could not move at all. Tang Yu supported her politely and pushed her away from him. It was as if he did not notice her gaze. Then, he looked at Tang Xine. I'll pick you up tonight. Tang Xine was a little anxious. Didn't they agree to let her stay here? Just as she opened her mouth, Tang Yu walked towards Sun Feifei. The two of them got into the car together. Before Sun Feifei got in, she turned around and smiled at Pei Chi. Tang Xine said unhappily, that woman is so sneaky. It's like she's showing off. She snorted lightly. If it weren't for her Chi, how could Sun Feifei, that wooden beauty, get her turn? Pei Chi didn't say anything. She carried the bags to her car. Before she started the car, she looked at Tang Xine and said seriously, your brother made his own choices. Don't ruin them. Tang Xine wanted to say something, but she swallowed her words. After returning home, Pei Chi quietly cooked. Tang Xine could feel that she was in a bad mood, so she tried to cheer her up, but Pei Chi only smiled faintly. Chi, I think the one you like is my brother, Tang Xine suddenly said with certainty. As she spoke, she stared straight at Pei Chi, as if she wanted to confirm it. Pei Chi's fingers paused for a moment. She looked at Tang Xine for a moment, then smiled faintly without saying anything. Tang Xine jumped down from the counter and wrapped her arms around Chi-Chi's arm. Chi, isn't it? Pei Chi pursed her lips. Nonsense. Tang Xine moved her body closer and said childishly, Chi, do you dare to look at my eyes? If you dare to look at me for more than a minute and say that you don't like my brother, I'll believe you. Lame. Pei Chi didn't want to play such childish games with her. Tang Xine pestered her. Chi, Pei Chi ignored her, so she jumped left and right like a little monkey. While they were fooling around, Pei Chi's phone rang. She wiped her hands and said, Tang Xine, stop fooling around. The matter between me and your brother is over. As she spoke, she walked towards the living room. Tang Xine followed her like a shadow. Pei Chi looked at the caller ID and hesitated. Should she pick it up, because it was Tang Yu? Chapter 343. Tang Xine pinched her throat and mimicked what she had just said. Tang Xine, I'm done with your brother. Pei Chi slapped her hand and glared at her before picking up the phone. What's up? Her tone was indifferent. The voice on the other end was even colder. Address. Huh. She was stunned. He seemed to be getting impatient. Your address. I'll come and pick Tang Xine up in a bit. Tang Xine heard it too. She was disappointed. Her brother had promised to let her stay here for a few days. Pei Chi was also surprised. She looked at Tang Xian and finally gave him the address. Mr. Tang is so pretentious. We've been here for a night, and he still doesn't know the address. As soon as he finished speaking, the other side hung up the phone mercilessly. Pei Chi held the phone. She was actually afraid. She was afraid that Tang Yu would bring Sun Feifei over. If that happened, how could she endure it? Tang Xian pouted and pretended to be dead on the sofa. Tang Xian, listen to your brother. Pei Chi was helpless. Her relationship with Tang Yu was strained. She couldn't speak for Tang Xian. Moreover, if she forced Tang Xian to stay here, it would seem like she had ulterior motives. Tang Xian's voice was muffled and couldn't be heard clearly. Looking at her, Pei Chi's heart softened. After all, Tang Xian was still a child. She patted her. At least we can have a good meal. Tang Xian couldn't bear to see Pei Chi suffer. No matter how disappointed she was, she still got up and clung to Pei Chi. It was already 6:00 in the evening when dinner was ready. There were 4 stir-fry dishes, 2 cold dishes and a soup pot on the small dining table. Although they were home-cooked dishes, they looked delicious. Tang Xian forgot about what happened earlier. She secretly picked up a piece of meat. Pei Chi patted her. Use chopsticks. Tang Xian stuck out her tongue and asked, Can I have some wine? Pei Chi glanced at her. Are you of age? Tang Xian puffed her chest out. Pei Chi, you're not much older than me. Pei Chi was amused. Just as she was laughing, the doorbell rang. She paused and then realized something. He looked down at the time. It was only a little over 6:00. Is he here to pick up Tang Xian now? He glanced at Tang Xian, who was curled up like a little mouse, and shook his head. I'll go open the door. When he opened the door, he saw Tang Yu. He had already changed into a new set of clothes. Compared to when he was with Sun Feifei in the afternoon, he now appeared more casual. He was wearing a black coat over a gray high-collared coat. The only thing that remained unchanged was his long, slender, and powerful legs. Pei Chi looked down. Are you taking her away now? She could not make Tang Xian stay, but she hoped that Tang Xian could have a meal with her. It was the new year, and she had no family. Tang Xian was the only family she had left. She thought that he would answer yes or no, but that was not what he said. He asked her in a deep voice, What about you? Do you want me to take her away or not? Pei Chi looked up and stared into his deep, dark eyes. She did not speak for a long time. His long legs were already in front of her. Tang Xian whimpered, Brother, look at how good Chi-Chi's cooking is. She looked at Tang Yu pleadingly. She did not want to leave. Tang Yu sat down at the dining table. He looked at the food and smiled. It's really good. Chapter 344. Do you mind if I eat with you? He asked emotionlessly. But when he looked at Tang Xian, his gaze was warm. Pei Chi felt a wave of weakness. He wants to eat with them? It's the new year. Is he sure he doesn't want to accompany his mother or Sun Feifei? She didn't move. Tang Yu frowned. Miss Pei? Those 3 words widened the distance between them. Pei Chi walked over. I'll go get the food for you. Tang Xian shrieked. I want a drink. As soon as she finished speaking, Tang Yu glanced at her, and Tang Xian didn't dare to say anything else. She curled up like a pitiful child. Pei Chi didn't know why, but she felt like a mother hen protecting her chicks. She looked at Tang Yu. You don't have to be so fierce to her. I'm teaching my sister a lesson. What does that have to do with you, Miss Pei? He looked at her coldly. Pei Chi pursed her lips. It doesn't matter, but this is my house. Tang Xian secretly gave her 100 thumbs up. Chi was the first person who dared to challenge her brother's authority. However, Pei Chi's leopard courage was only so little. After saying that, he escaped into the kitchen. Without her support, Tang Xian was very careful, afraid of angering the devil. You want to stay here? Tang Yu's tone was indifferent, as if he was asking casually. Tang Xian immediately nodded like a puppy. Tang Yu glanced at her and didn't say anything else. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Tang Yu became even bolder. Pei Chi came over with the food and asked for a drink. Pei Chi thought that Tang Xian would be leaving soon, so she went to get a bottle of red wine. Chi-Chi, you drink too. Tang Xian didn't dare to drink alone. Her brother was right beside her, staring at her like a wolf. Pei Chi-Chi poured a small glass for herself, but not for Tang Yu. He had to drive later. She had no idea that she was the one he wanted to let go of. The atmosphere was still tense, but fortunately, Tang Xian was talkative enough. One of them was eating, while the other was sipping wine. As they sipped, they drank too much. Tang Xian knew that her body was weak, so she put down the glass after drinking half of it. On the other hand, Pei Chi-Chi drank the entire bottle of red wine. As Tang Xian spoke, she noticed Pei Chi-Chi's blushing face. Chi-Chi, your face is so red. Tang Xian touched her carefully. She was a little worried. Red wine won't go bad. Tang Yu looked at his sister indifferently and then scolded softly. I'll help her in when you're done cleaning up. Tang Xian was stunned. I'll help Chi-Chi in. She didn't dare to finish her sentence. Tang Yu looked at her. She gathered her courage and said, Big brother already has a girlfriend. Tang Yu remained calm. You're afraid that I'll take advantage of her? Tang Xian nodded vigorously, like a little wolf dog protecting its master. You're thinking too much. He used his authority as a brother. Clean up. Tang Xian looked at him. Was her brother not going to leave? She pursed her lips and began to negotiate. Let me stay, and let Big Brother help Chi-Chi in. Tang Yu looked at her. I know you just want to take advantage of Chi-Chi. You don't like Sun Feifei at all. Tang Xian shouted. Sometimes, one had to admire a child's intuition. She was always right. Tang Xian sat on the sofa and hugged her pillow. She saw her brother coming out of the room, dressed neatly. She thought of a word. A beast in human clothing. Tang Xian's long hair was loose and draped over her shoulders. She hugged a pillow and looked very fragile. Tang Yu coughed softly and walked over. Watching TV? Brother, are you not planning to leave? Tang Xian asked him carefully. Tang Yu casually sat down. With a sweep of his long arm, he pulled Tang Xian to his side. He hugged her with one arm and reached out to rub her face. He grunted softly. Tang Xian's eyes widened. She knew it. Chapter 346. Tang Yu changed the topic and pursed his lips. You and Chi-Chi seem to talk about everything? Tang Xian crawled over carefully and half knelt beside him. She placed her hand on his thigh and propped her chin up. I won't say anything that I shouldn't say. For example, you kissed Chi-Chi. Tang Yu lowered his head and looked at his sister threateningly. Tang Xian flinched. I promise I won't say anything, but brother. Tang Xian suddenly stopped talking. She stared at Tang Yu's neck. Her gaze turned strange. She touched it with her hand and bit her lip. No, you were bitten by a vixen. Chi-Chi can't be with you. Tang Yu couldn't help but laugh. He caressed his neck and chuckled. Tang Xian, how did you know it was a vixen? It can't be Chi-Chi. Tang Xian pouted and said unhappily. Tang Yu smiled but didn't say anything. Tang Xian looked up and was stunned. It can't be? Chi-Chi bit me? Tang Yu patted the back of her hand. You said that you shouldn't say anything. Don't you remember? Tang Xian swallowed her saliva and nodded after a while. She remembered. Brother was too evil. She used to think that he was a beast, but now she felt that he was worse than a beast. If you say anything, I'll send you back now. The brother was bullying his sister. Tang Xian nodded with tears in her eyes. Boo-hoo, Big Brother is so bad. Tang Yu pressed Tang Xian's head into his arms. Let's watch TV. We'll sleep early after that. She didn't want to sleep early. She wanted to sleep with Chi-Chi, but Tang Xian didn't dare to say it. She stared at her brother, the great demon king. At 9 o'clock, Tang Yu said on time, take your medicine and go to sleep. Tang Xian was touched. She grabbed his hand and whispered, Big Brother, I don't have long to live, right? Nonsense. He patted her little head. It can be cured. Isn't it fine now? Tang Xian sniffled. I heard Mommy and Daddy arguing. Mommy said I wouldn't live past 20. Tang Yu frowned and felt another layer of anger towards Zhao Ku. How old was Tang Xian? She was already terrified of this illness, yet she was still talking about it. Tang Yu's heart softened a little. He reached out and patted his sister's head. Silly girl, as long as there's a suitable bone marrow, it can be cured. Tang Xian pouted and hugged her knees. She looked hurt. Brother, I've been waiting for so many years. Is it because I can't wait any longer? He smiled and pulled Tang Xian into his arms. Brother, can you kiss me? Tang Xian looked up at him. I might not even get a boyfriend in the future. Brother, give me a kiss. Just take it that I've had a boyfriend. Tang Xian clung onto him pitifully. Actually, Tang Yu was feeling a little down. He loved Tang Xian, but he didn't take much care of her. He couldn't bear to reject her wish. He kissed her forehead and said in a hoarse voice, Our Tang Xian will definitely get better. Tang Xian whimpered and lay on his lap, not saying a word. Her brother had never doted on her like this before. At this moment, she felt very happy. Tang Xian pressed her face against Tang Yu's and hugged him. Brother, we'll always be together with Chi-Chi, okay? She didn't hear what Tang Yu said. Chapter 347. Tang Xian was sleepy. Tang Yu did not have the heart to wake her up, so he tiptoed to the guest room and found her backpack. He took out the medicine, poured some water, and fed it to Tang Xian. Tang Xian groggily called out to her brother. I'm here. He smiled warmly and carried her to the guest room. He placed Tang Xian on the bed and helped her remove her jacket and trousers. Tang Yu did all of this as if he was taking care of a child. He even softened his heart. He wondered if his and Chi-Chi's children would be like Tang Xian. Chi-Chi was not a boring person. It was just that the environment she grew up in was a little twisted, so she was cold to outsiders. He covered Tang Xian with the blanket and sat for a while before getting up. Before he left, he heard Tang Xian moaning in her sleep. Chi-Chi, I don't want to go back. Tang Yu laughed in his heart. He did not know why Tang Xian liked Chi-Chi so much. He turned around, wanting to comfort Tang Xian, but when he turned around, he was a little stunned. Tang Xian was drooling. She's so old, and she's still drooling. Tang Yu shook his head and took a tissue to wipe it off for her. Then, he closed the door for her and walked out. When he reached the living room, there were people sleeping on both sides. The two little ones. He held his forehead and laughed self-deprecatingly. It was obvious that he didn't want them to spend the new year alone, so he left his mother behind. Now, one was asleep and the other was drunk. He was the only one left. He stood there for a while and looked at the television. Even if he was alone, his heart was filled with satisfaction. At midnight, he turned off the television and walked into Pei Chi-Chi's bedroom. He removed the sweater and pants, leaving only a pair of black boots. He lifted the blanket and lay down beside her. Pei Chi-Chi was originally curled up, but when she felt his warmth, she automatically curled up and buried her whole body in his arms, her little face resting on his shoulder. Tang Yu looked down at her in the dim light. Her long hair was like ink on the pillow and wrapped around his body. Her little face was slightly red from drinking too much, and her body was warm. His fingers slowly fell on her back, and there was an unquestionable gentleness in his eyes. Pei Chi-Chi, you still dare to say that you don't love me? He held her in his arms and closed his eyes. This was the first time he slept with her without any desire. Late at night, the fireworks were still going off outside. Tang Yu opened his dark eyes and said softly, Chi-Chi, Happy New Year. And little fool, you can't escape. When Pei Chi-Chi woke up, she felt that her waist was a little sore, and the sunlight was dazzling. She forced her eyes open and was stunned. In front of him was Tang Yu. It was a naked Tang Yu. Even if he was wearing a pair of underpants, it couldn't hide anything. And at this moment, she was nestled in his arms. Her little mouth was facing his shoulder, and more importantly, there was her saliva on it. Pei Chi-Chi's eyes widened. She wanted to move away, but the moment she moved, her body became empty and she fell straight off the bed. A big hand caught her, and then she fell into his arms. He groaned, probably because of the pain. Pei Chi buried her face in his chest and whispered, "Why are you on my bed?" Chapter 348. Pei Chi did not dare to move. She only whispered to him. Tang Yu's fingers pressed down, but in the end, he let go of her. He leaned against the headboard and looked at her. "You and Tang Xian are sleeping in one room each. Miss Pei, do you want me to sleep with Tang Xian and my sister?" His tone was very calm. It did not seem like he had woken up early in the morning. Pei Chi's voice was a little weak. "No. And don't worry, I won't do anything to you. After all..." He did not finish his sentence and was interrupted by him. Pei Chi said angrily, "I know. You have a girlfriend." He was obviously stunned for a moment. Then, there was a subtle smile in his eyes. "That's right." As he said that, there was really no need to lie together anymore. He got up and put on a pair of trousers and a sweater. However, a box of things fell on the ground. He bent down to pick it up. He had bought it at the supermarket today. Pei Chi saw it too. Her face was a little pale. She pursed her lips and did not say a word. Tang Yu looked at her and put the small box into his pocket. He did not explain anything. Indeed, there was no need to explain anything to her. He turned around. "I'll come again tonight." Pei Chi was stunned. Her voice was a little shaky. "What do you mean?" Tang Yu was very calm. "I'm worried about Tang Xian here. If you're worried, you can bring Tang Xian back." She probably said that out of spite. He had done that with Sun Feifei, and now he was sleeping at her place with condoms for another woman in his pocket. What was going on? There was a trace of a smile in Tang Yu's eyes again. Before he could say anything, Tang Xian stood at the door with a little rabbit in her arms. She looked at Pei Chi. "Chi, you don't like me, do you? Is that why you want to chase me away?" Pei Chi's lips moved, but she could not say anything. Tang Yu chuckled and walked into the bathroom. He said briskly, "You better explain to Tang Xian." Pei Chi looked at the tearful Tang Xian and the cold face of Tang Yu. She had a feeling in her heart. She should be the one leaving. Let the siblings dominate this place. When she turned around, Tang Xian was still looking at her. Suddenly, Pei Chi felt a headache. Chi. It was that incredibly soft meow of a kitten again. When Tang Yu came out of the bathroom, he saw that Pei Chi was still being pestered by Tang Xian. His mood suddenly became better. Under the morning light, he looked extraordinarily handsome. He bent down and picked Tang Xian up. "All right, stop fooling around." Tang Xian was in Tang Yu's arms. She leaned on Tang Yu's shoulder and made a face at Pei Chi. She looked like a villain who was intoxicated by success. Pei Chi suddenly felt a little envious, but she could only hide it in her heart. Pei Chi sat there. This was her home, but she suddenly felt that she was the outsider. The faint smile on her face froze. Finally, she shook her head. Tang Yu took Tang Xian out for breakfast. He did not ask Pei Chi, so she naturally did not follow. But he did not take Tang Xian's luggage with him. She was surprised and suspicious. She wanted to ask, but she was afraid that Tang Xian would stick to him again. So she was restless the whole morning. At around 10 o'clock, Tang Yu brought Tang Xian back. Chapter 349. After dinner, Tang Xian lay on the sofa and watched TV with great interest. Tang Yu walked to the balcony to smoke. He was wearing a pair of black trousers and the same sweater. His short haircut made his facial features look even more defined. He leaned against the balcony and smoked 2 or 3 cigarettes at a moderate pace. His elegant appearance made her house seem a little cramped, but he seemed to be at ease. Was he and Tang Xian planning to spend the entire New Year's here? Pei Chi stood in the living room and bit her lower lip. She thought for a moment and walked to the balcony. Tang Xian suddenly said, "Chi, if I were you, I wouldn't walk into the tiger's mouth like a wolf." The little girl stared at the TV and said in an old-fashioned tone, "My brother looks like a hungry wolf. He's not picky at all." Pei Chi thought she heard wrong. Tang Xian was so young, but she knew the words hungry wolf. "I'll deal with you later," Pei Chi warned. Tang Xian giggled. Her mouth was stuffed with slices, and she ate like a little mouse. However, she would be stuffing herself with dog food later. Chi-Chi didn't have time to deal with her. Her brother would definitely deal with Chi-Chi first. Tang Xian felt that she was being unkind. Pei Chi-Chi glared at her again. She opened the balcony door, closed it, and drew the curtains. Tang Xian whimpered. Silly Chi-Chi. Tang Yu was still smoking as he leaned against the wall. Behind him was the bustling night view, and countless fireworks bloomed above and behind him. But none of this could match up to his nobility, nor did it taint him with the slightest bit of the secular world. His dark eyes watched as Pei Chi-Chi pushed the door open and walked in. He flicked the cigarette and looked at her. What's the matter? Pei Chi-Chi stopped 3 steps away from him and looked up at him. The lights on the balcony were off and his back was to the outside, so she couldn't see his expression clearly. She just felt that he was unfathomable. When are you bringing Tang Xian home? She looked up as she spoke. The fireworks outside were all imprinted in her eyes, like countless little stars blooming, dazzling her eyes. Tang Yu just looked at her and didn't say anything for a long time. Pei Chi-Chi was a little uneasy. She pursed her lips and looked at him. He finally spoke. His voice was abnormally hoarse. She's annoying? I'm annoyed by you. Pei Chi-Chi didn't say anything. It's not convenient for her to stay at my mother's place, so she can only stay here for a few days, he said lightly, as if it were a matter of course. Can't you stay there? She said without thinking. Tang Yu stared at her for a long time before slowly saying, Pei Chi-Chi, Sun Feifei is different from you. She won't be happy if Tang Xian stays with me. Tang Xian, Pei Chi-Chi said nothing. Xian, of her of, Tang of. Yes, she'll be unhappy. She looked up at him again. She'll be even more unhappy if you stay at my place. Tang Yu didn't answer. He took out another cigarette and took a puff. What about you, Pei Chi-Chi? If I bring Tang Xian home and let Sun Feifei stay there too, will you be unhappy? He took out the 01 box from his pocket and put it on the balcony. He smiled. Will you? Pei Chi-Chi couldn't help but stare at the box. She felt like she was suffocating. She couldn't answer him. Chapter 350. But it was obvious that he didn't want to let her off. His voice became sterner as he said, Pei Chi-Chi, will you? She was startled, and her heart began to beat wildly again. Tang Yu took a step forward and came to her side. The tips of his shoes were almost touching hers. His long fingers pinched her beautiful chin and lifted it slightly. She looked at him and immediately lowered her eyes, wanting to retreat. But he didn't allow it. He pinched her chin forcefully and forced her to lift her head. Pei Chi-Chi, do you want me to do that to her? She was stunned for a moment. Her mouth was slightly agape as she looked at him hopelessly. She knew what he was talking about and knew that it was dangerous now, but she just couldn't move her eyes away. His hot breath enveloped her body. She couldn't move at all and could only watch him lower his head. His thin lips hovered above her lips. His straight nose touched hers gently, and his dark eyes looked into her eyes. He was so close to her that her legs went weak. Pei Chi-Chi's little hand grabbed onto the wall beside her. Her fingers turned white. His lips gradually lowered. He only touched her lightly and stopped after a light taste. Then, his deep voice rang out, and he pressed his lips against hers. Do you want me to do that to her? Her little hand gripped the wall even tighter, and her body leaned backwards, trying to escape from the pressure he brought. But he also lowered himself, so that it looked like she was sending herself to him. Just as she was about to fall, his large palms supported her waist. His lips curled into a mocking smile. Pei Chi-Chi, do you know that your eyelashes tremble when you lie? She bit her lip. She really wanted to find a mirror to look at. But now she didn't dare to move, for fear that he would do something to her again. His fingers gently caressed her red lips. In the dark night, that redness was a little seductive. His long fingers caressed her lips gently. His face was close to her ear, and he said in a low voice, Do you want me to do that to her too? Even do what I do with you? Her body was extremely stiff. His voice was very seductive, especially in this cold and quiet night. Pei Chi-Chi pursed her lips and bit his finger. He did not take his hand back. He looked at her intently, and she saw a small flame ignite in his eyes. She couldn't help but swallow her saliva. Tang Yu couldn't wait to kill her. He let out a long sigh and withdrew his hand. Before she could react, he pressed her against the wall and sealed her mouth with his thin lips. Pei Chi-Chi's eyes widened. Her palms were pressed flat against the tiles behind her. It was cold, but it couldn't extinguish her burning body. His kiss was a little brutal, as if he was punishing her, but at the same time, it seemed like he was using all of his strength. Her lips were hurting from the friction. She struggled a little, but he pressed her palm down and slowly moved it to the top of her head. He pinned her firmly to the wall and used one of his hands to pinch her chin. With a slight force, she unconsciously opened her mouth slightly. He took advantage of the situation and entered her, entangling her. This kiss was getting deeper and hotter. It seemed like he didn't intend to restrain himself and let the kiss bring up his entire body's desire. Pei Chi-Chi could only submit. She lifted her little face and was kissed by him over and over again. Her legs felt weak and her body felt a little embarrassed. She had known about love for a long time. She knew that it was desire. Chapter 351. Tang Yu suddenly let go of her just as she was lost in her thoughts. Pei Chi-Chi lost her support and her legs gave way, almost slipping. She was still panting. Her eyes were closed and her mouth was slightly swollen. She opened her mouth absent-mindedly. She looked so alluring that Tang Yu wanted to kiss her again. However, he only looked at her coldly. His previous passion had been wiped clean. He looked down at her and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry." Her eyes opened. Although he didn't say it, she knew what he meant. His current girlfriend was Sun Fei Fei. He kissed her, so he said he was sorry. At that moment, she was infuriated. What did he think she was? Tang Yu didn't expect her to have such a childish behavior. He didn't pay attention for a moment and was kicked by her. Pei Chi-Chi immediately ran towards the door. When she twisted the doorknob, a force from behind dragged her back and heavily threw her into the embrace of a man. Immediately, his domineering aura infected her body. "Let go of me." Her voice was filled with anger. He hugged her, trapping her arms in his embrace. "Miss Pei, you hurt a certain part of me." His tone was indifferent, and his words were ruthless. She couldn't tell that he was being perverted. It was good to be good-looking. Pei Chi-Chi pursed her lips. "What do you want? Mr. Tang, do you want me to pay for your medical fees?" He nodded in agreement. "It's not that serious. You did a good job of bandaging my wound last time. You can take a look at it." Pei Chi-Chi didn't think much of it. She didn't expect him to carry her and walk to the living room, then to her bedroom. Tang Xian was still eating, her mouth full of dog food. She knew it. Chi-Chi was walking into a trap. Pei Chi-Chi was stunned for a moment before she called out Tang Xian's name. She felt that she had been tricked, but how could she dare to interfere with Tang Yu's affairs? Tang Xian groaned and pretended not to see anything. The door slammed shut with a bang. Tang Xian took a careful look, and her whole body trembled. "Chi-Chi, I'll count your bones later." Pei Chi-Chi was carried into the bedroom by Tang Yu and thrown onto the bed. She flipped over and shifted her body inwards, pursing her lips as she watched him unbuckle his belt. "Mr. Tang." She covered her eyes with her hands and said in a sharp voice, "Don't forget that you have a girlfriend." She tried to awaken his conscience, but the sound of clothes being taken off continued to ring in her ears. She bit her lip, knowing that she could not resist him. Leaning against the headboard, she turned her face to the side and decided to silently protest. Then the bed sank deep, and she clenched her little hands nervously. Then, his breath enveloped her, and he seemed to be very close to her. Tang Yu stared at her closed eyes and suddenly chuckled. "Miss Pei, I just wanted you to check my wound. What did you think I wanted to do?" His fingers gently stroked her red lips, and his voice was low and hoarse. "Did you think I wanted to make love to you?" There was no moment more embarrassing than this. Pei Chi-Chi opened her eyes immediately and stared at his eyes. Tang Yu sat down and pulled her over. Now, let's check. Chapter 352. Pei Chi lowered her head to look at him. Then, she turned her face away and said, Mr. Tang, please have some self-respect. He had a noble look on his face. Miss Pei, I'm asking you to examine my wound. What's wrong? Are you thinking too much? She was a little angry. No matter how stupid she was, she wouldn't be so stupid as to not feel anything when he was so mean. She pursed her lips and didn't speak for a long time. Tang Yu's voice was even more indifferent. Remove it for me and examine it. He admitted that he was mean and bullied her. But when she closed her eyes, a demon was born in his heart. He wanted to see her cry and beg for mercy. God knew how much self-control he had to use to not push her down. This was already the lightest punishment he could get. Are you going to leave after the examination? She pursed her beautiful lips and looked up at him. She was wearing home clothes. It was fluffy and looked very cute. Her long hair was braided into a ponytail, and her features were picturesque. She was so innocent as she knelt beside him. Tang Yu lowered his eyes to look at her. He reached into his trouser pocket and took out a cigarette. He lit it and let out a long puff of smoke. That was the only way he could suppress the evil fire in his body. Pei Chi knelt beside him and carefully examined him. To be honest, she knew that he wasn't hurt at all. It was just that he was mean, but in her heart, he was still a threat. It was as simple as that. Done. In addition to the examination, she also offered a massage. Tang Yu almost burned himself with the cigarette in his hand. Her hands were too soft. He looked down at her eyes, but she was still kneeling there, on the same bed. But it was no longer the past. Pei Chi's eyes were a little hot, and she couldn't explain it. Just as he had always emphasized to her, he already had someone else by his side. I'll sleep with Tang Xian tonight. You can bring her back tomorrow. She made up her mind and said. Tang Yu tidied up his clothes and continued smoking. When she walked to the door, he said, Are you afraid? Pei Chi's fingers fell on the doorknob and she paused. She didn't turn around and said softly, Yes, I'm afraid. When she confessed, he didn't know what to do with her. He looked at her deeply. Pei Chi walked out, and her legs were a little weak. Tang Xian looked at her, and she dropped the photo on the sofa. She quickly picked it up and put it in her mouth. She looked at Pei Chi while eating. The sun rose from the west. Her brother actually didn't eat Chi. I'm going to sleep first. Pei Chi's voice was calm. I've told your brother that he will bring you back tomorrow. It wasn't that she didn't want to see Tang Yu, but seeing him would hurt more than not seeing him. When she looked into his eyes and he kissed her, she felt pain, as if a piece of her heart had been ripped from it. He left and took that piece with him. Although Tang Xian didn't want to, she was still worried when she saw Pei Chi like this. She lowered her head and said, Oh. Then, she watched Pei Chi walk into the guest room. After the door closed, Tang Xian carefully ran to Tang Yu. Tang Yu was leaning against the headboard with an indifferent expression. She didn't know what he was thinking. Chapter 353. You're just a kid. Don't bother yourself with adult matters, Tang Yu said calmly. Tang Xian pouted. Chi is also a kid. Chi will only be 21 after the new year. She looked at Tang Yu as if he was a beast. Tang Yu pursed his lips. He couldn't do anything to his sister. He reached out and pinched her little face. Nonsense. That's right. Tang Xian said boldly. Chi is still a student, and you're already bullying her. Her brother glared at her. Tang Xian didn't dare to make a sound. She crept away like a little mouse. After she left, Tang Yu let out a long sigh. Tang Xian was right. He did make a move on a kid. When Chi followed him, she wasn't even 20 years old. He laid down and touched the pillow under his head. It was indeed the pillow in Xia City. That night, no one slept well. Tang Xian especially hugged Pei Chi and drooled. She drooled the whole night. Breakfast was prepared by Pei Chi. She wouldn't be calculative with Tang Yu. After breakfast, Tang Xian followed behind Tang Yu and was chased out by Pei Chi-Chi. She looked back as she walked, hoping that Chi-Chi would ask her to stay. Pei Chi-Chi was reluctant, but she had to send Tang Xian away. She steeled her heart and closed the door. Tang Xian carried her bag and sat in Tang Yu's car. Every strand of her hair was crestfallen. "Brother, Chi-Chi doesn't want me anymore." Tang Yu reached out and patted her little head. He smiled. "You still have a brother. Chi-Chi is Chi-Chi. Brother is brother. It's different." Tang Xian was very persistent with Pei Chi-Chi. She didn't know why. Her mother didn't like Chi-Chi, and her brother and Chi-Chi had broken up, but she just wanted to be close to Chi-Chi. Tang Yu looked at her silently for a while, then started the car. In the end, he still sent Tang Xian back. Tang Ziyuan had called him several times in the past 2 days. He also knew the reason why Tang Xian left home. It was nothing more than Zhao Ke's affairs being reported in the newspapers. Actually, Tang Yu wasn't surprised. He had heard about it a long time ago, but he didn't take it to heart when Qingqing mentioned it a few times. He had never cared about unimportant people or unimportant things. But he didn't expect Zhao Ke to be so careless and sell the photos to the newspaper. Naturally, Tang Ziyuan was still angry. Zhao Ke, on the other hand, was more restrained, but she was still strict with Tang Xian. When Tang Xian returned home, she had to live with her tail between her legs. It was quite pitiful. Tang Yu watched as Tang Xian walked into Yanhui. The car only stopped for a moment before it drove off. Now that Tang Xian was back, he had no reason to visit Pei Chi-Chi. Without Tang Xian in the house, it was a little quiet, even though Pei Chi-Chi had already turned the television to the maximum. In fact, she knew very well that the loneliness wasn't because Tang Xian was absent, but because Tang Yu was absent. When he was around, she felt anxious and uneasy. But when he wasn't around, her heart felt empty. Pei Chi-Chi told him that she was afraid, and what she said was true. She was afraid that she would get used to it. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to get used to life without him. She was afraid. When Pei Chi-Chi went to clean up the bedroom, she realized that Tang Yu had left the box of t-shirts on her bedside table. She stared at it for a long time, then finally swept it into the trash can, along with the rubbish in the house. Chapter 354. Pei Chi-Chi looked at it for a long time, her fingers clenching tightly. A thought suddenly appeared in her mind, and this thought made her unable to remain calm. Her gaze fell on the photo for a long time. Then, she saw the name tag of a certain hotel on the bedside. She immediately got up, changed her clothes, and left with her bag. She drove to the hotel and went to the front desk. The receptionist looked at her suspiciously. "Miss, do you want to book a room?" Pei Chi-Chi shook her head. "I want to check the room records. Is that okay?" "That's against the rules. But if there's a special need..." The receptionist laughed dryly, but her eyes were burning as she looked at Pei Chi-Chi. Her meaning was very obvious. Pei Chi-Chi wasn't an unreasonable person. She took out 1,000 yuan from her bag and put it on the counter. Biting her lip, she said, "My boyfriend might have betrayed me and got together with a rich woman. I want to check." The receptionist looked at Pei Chi-Chi sympathetically. She put the money into her bag and said angrily, "I hate scumbags like this the most. Tell me the name, and I'll check it for you." "Help me check the woman's name." Usually, they use the woman's name to register. Pei Chi-Chi's fingers tightened on her bag. "Her name is Zhao Ke, the Ke from Wangke." The lady at the front desk tapped her nails a few times, and Zhao Ke's name appeared. "There are only 2 records. She got a room with a man named Ronglei." The receptionist looked at Pei Chi-Chi sympathetically. "Is Ronglei your boyfriend?" Pei Chi-Chi lowered her eyes, looking like she was about to cry. Yes. In fact, she was shocked inside. Ronglei? Wasn't that Zhou Meilin's gigolo? Why was he with Zhao Ke? At this moment, the receptionist had already checked Ronglei's name. She pulled out a long list of hundreds of names. She looked at Pei Chi-Chi sympathetically. Your boyfriend is very strong. He's had sex with more than 200 women in 3 years. Pei Chi forced a smile. Don't tell anyone that I'm here to check the records. Of course, this kind of scumbag should leave him. The receptionist also felt that it was a pity. How could such a beautiful girl be with such a scumbag? However, after Pei Chi left, the receptionist looked at the record again and realized, this man is a gigolo. She snorted lightly. Not only did she cheat a woman of her money, but she also harmed such a beautiful young lady. Pei Chi sat in the car, feeling a little uneasy. Zhao Ku, Zhou Meilin, Ronglei, her car accident. It was as if something had broken out of the cocoon. That thought flashed through her mind. She wanted to catch it, but she couldn't. She tried her best to calm herself down and closed her eyes to think about that day. Car accident. Zhou Meilin. Ronglei is back? Ronglei and Zhao Ku had a falling out? Was that why there was that photo in the newspaper? She thought for a long time and decided to check at the news agency. Pei Chi rushed to the address of the city news. It was a small building that wasn't very bright, which didn't match its name. Shaowen had helped her find the address. Shaowen had been a secretary for a long time and had some connections. Because it was the Lunar New Year, the news agency was very quiet. The old man in the mailroom looked at Pei Chi and stopped her. Young lady, who are you looking for? Pei Chi stopped in her tracks and smiled. I want to buy a news section, but I don't know which department to look for. Chapter 355. The old man in charge of the mailroom adjusted his glasses and looked up. You're looking for Mr. Su. He's working today. You can go in and look for him. Pei Chi nodded and walked in. There were 2 rows of offices inside, and most of them were closed. Only the innermost office was open. Pei Chi stood at the door and saw a middle-aged man in a black coat sitting inside. He was holding a cigarette and reading a script. Mr. Su heard footsteps and looked up. He saw Pei Chi standing at the door. What's the matter? Mr. Su looked at the young lady and asked politely. Pei Chi walked in and placed a newspaper in front of Mr. Su. She asked softly, are these photos given to you by someone named Ronglei? Director Su only took a glance and remembered that there was indeed such a thing. This section usually sells for 5,000. But because it involves someone's privacy, I took 20,000. He did not hide it. Pei Chi lowered her eyes and smiled. Then you must have other photos here, right? Mr. Su narrowed his eyes and took a step back. He looked at Pei Chi from head to toe. Why? You want to buy it? He asked suspiciously. Do you have a grudge with these 2 people? He's my boyfriend. That woman snatched him away. Pei Chi looked down. I will not let that woman off easily. Mr. Su sneered and opened the drawer to look for something. He said to Pei Chi, I've seen this kind of drama many times. Isn't it just a man? It's not worth it. Isn't this kind of man just good-looking? Even though he said that, he still took out a thick stack of photos and placed them on the table. I can sell these photos to you, but I have to say this first. Whatever happens has nothing to do with me, and I won't take responsibility for it. Of course, I can't say that I'm the one who sold these photos. It's all up to you. As Director Su spoke, he took another cigarette and said lightly, Don't think that our newspaper office has a great reputation outside. In fact, it's long gone. It's just an empty shell. Otherwise, why would we accept this kind of business? Pei Chi pursed her lips. Director Su raised his finger and gestured. 5,000 apiece. No bargaining. If you can accept this price, then we have a deal. Pei Chi took the photos and looked at them one by one. She frowned slightly. To be honest, the photo that Ronglei had placed in the newspaper was really special. These photos were the real highlight. He was almost naked and unsightly. Director Su looked at Pei Chi coldly. He could not help but feel a little surprised. This little girl was actually able to maintain her composure even after seeing all this. Pei Chi counted the photos. There were about 20 of them. 100,000. I'll buy it, and I'll give you 200,000 yuan. Even if Pei Chi didn't say it, Director Su understood what she meant. He nodded his head. All right, you don't have to worry about the rest. He put the money in a brown paper bag and handed it to her. Pei Chi pursed her lips and took out 200,000 yuan from her bag. It was obvious that she had prepared this beforehand. Director Su took the money and did not say much. He sent Pei Chi off personally. Chapter 356. The old man in the mailroom wouldn't say anything since he got the money for free. Director Su narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction of the stairs. He suddenly felt that he had seen that girl before. Where had he seen her before? He couldn't remember for a long time. Finally, he thought of something and ran back to his office to look through the old newspapers. He found it. She was in the picture with Mr. Tang from Shengyuan. He remembered that the girl's surname was Pei. She was supposed to be engaged to Mr. Tang, but the rumor said that she ran away. Director Su's body went limp. He felt that he had been involved in something terrible. Once again, he walked to the mailroom and passed a cigarette to Elder Lin. If today's incident is leaked, we won't be able to keep our rice bowls anymore. Old Lin nodded. Director Su patted his shoulder again. We have to work until we retire. He went back and gave Old Lin another 10,000 yuan. Remember, don't say that you saw this girl. If they didn't say it, they would have nothing to do with it. If they said it, they would lose their lives. Downstairs, Pei Chi was sitting in the car. She closed her eyes and her mind was in a mess. Zhao Ku was the one who didn't want her to marry into the Tang family. Zhou Meilin was the one who hated her the most. But how daring was Zhou Meilin? Did she really dare to hire someone to kill her? Pei Chi pursed her lips. She went to the place where Zhou Meilin was locked up. She asked to see Zhou Meilin, but the person inside came out and shook his head. Zhou Meilin doesn't want to see you. Pei Chi was a little disappointed. Zhou Meilin didn't want to see her, so she couldn't force her. Did she say anything else? She asked the prison warden. The warden thought for a while and shook his head. No, but she asked why Pei Huan didn't come. He looked at Pei Chi. Why? Aren't you her daughter? I am, but I have some conflicts with my mother. She looked at the warden. Can you pass the message again? Tell her that Pei Huan came with me. The warden looked at her with a deep gaze. Pei Chi took out an envelope and said in a low voice, I just want to ask a few questions. It won't cause any bad effects. The warden took the letter and thought for a moment before saying, I also need to see if the person is willing. The instructions from above are not to be forced. Prisoners are also human beings, and they have their rights as citizens. He stared at Pei Chi and pressed an internal line. Xiaozhong, tell Zhou Meilin that her daughter, Pei Huan, is here. After hanging up, he looked at Pei Chi. You only have 5 minutes. Thank you. Pei Chi knew that there was only one chance like this. She followed a prison guard to a small reception room that was blocked by a barbed wire fence. When Zhou Meilin came out, her hair was a little messy, and she was wearing a plain prison uniform. Her face was sallow, and her eyebrows were lowered. She must have suffered a lot in here. Pei Chi thought about it and agreed. Pei Huan didn't ask questions, and Zhou Meilin didn't have anyone to take care of her. Naturally, she was in dire straits. When she saw Pei Chi, Zhou Meilin's slightly dull eyes lit up for a moment and then quickly dimmed. She said to the female prison guard next to her, I don't want to see her. I want to go back. I want to go back. She spoke incoherently. However, the prison guard was ordered by her superior to keep Zhou Meilin in custody. As long as she moved, the electric baton would hit her. Chapter 357. Pei Chi walked over and was separated from Zhou Meilin by the barbed wire. She looked straight at Zhou Meilin with her eyes that were as dark as midnight. I just want to ask you one thing. Zhou Meilin seemed to be prepared for her arrival. She lowered her head and lowered her eyes. Her voice was a little hoarse. Where's Pei Huan? I only want to see my Huan Huan. Pei Chi looked at the old woman in front of her. Really, she was a far cry from how she used to be. In the past, she only thought that Zhou Meilin was vulgar. She was already so old, but she still dressed up in gaudy clothes. But it was better than being in such a sorry state now. Pei Huan won't be coming. Pei Chi smiled faintly. Pei Huan is now with a producer. She wants to be a star. Zhou Meilin was stunned. She suddenly raised her head and stared at Pei Chi. Her eyes were wide open, as if they were about to pop out. All of a sudden, she broke free from the prison guard and ran to the barbed wire. Her fingers, which were as thin as a chicken's, grabbed the barbed wire as if she wanted to grab Pei Chi in her hands. She kept saying, "How is that possible? How could my Huan Huan sleep with someone else? She's the Lin family's wife. She's pregnant." Her fingers grabbed a corner of Pei Chi's clothes, and she widened her eyes. "Pei Chi, you must be talking nonsense. You're jealous of Huan Huan, so you deliberately said that, right?" Pei Chi did not break free. She just looked at Zhou Meilin indifferently with a sneer at the corner of her mouth. Jinrong became a vegetable, and Pei Huan aborted the child. They divorced, and Pei Huan took 50 million. Don't you know about this? Zhou Meilin's yellowish face became even uglier. Her head could not help shaking, and her face was full of disbelief. She did all this for the sake of a better life for herself and Pei Huan. How could this fool get a divorce? Just that belly alone could ensure that she would not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of her life. It had to be said that Zhou Meilin knew her daughter's character very well. She knew that Pei Huan could not bear hardships and could only rely on others. I saw her the day before yesterday. She was with that man. Pei Chi's lips had a faint smile, and she was also taking drugs. Zhou Meilin's fingers tightened and suddenly loosened. She covered her ears and screamed hoarsely, "No, no, how could it be?" At this time, the prison guard rushed over and hit her with an electric baton. Zhou Meilin's body went numb from the pain. Her pale lips trembled as she squatted down. It was a subconscious reflex. Pei Chi could tell that Zhou Meilin had been beaten up quite a bit. She still stood there calmly and looked at Zhou Meilin. "All of this was caused by you. If it wasn't for the car accident you conspired, Jinrong would not have become like that, and Pei Huan would not have lost her footing." Zhou Meilin squatted down. Her hair piled up on her head like a pile of grass. Her face could not be seen, but she muttered to herself, "Yes, it's me, it's me. But shouldn't you be the one to die? Shouldn't a bastard like you be the one to die?" Pei Chi's heart turned cold. She looked up and closed her eyes. "Auntie, you've been squatting here for your entire life just for a gigolo. Is it worth it?" Zhou Meilin raised her head and smiled at Pei Chi. Her smile was terrifying. Chapter 358. After she said that, she realized that she seemed to have revealed something. She immediately shut her mouth and refused to say another word. Pei Chi looked at her and only felt that she was pitiful. After being sentenced for so many years, she still felt that she had sacrificed herself for love. Ronglei was also involved in this matter, right? She asked straightforwardly. Zhou Meilin looked at her defensively. There was a hint of cautiousness in her eyes, like a she-wolf. Then, she let out that mournful voice again. Pei Chi, don't even think about getting any information out of me. I did it alone. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Pei Chi did not say anything. She took out a photo from her pocket and handed it to the other side of the barbed wire. Zhou Meilin's gaze shifted and then landed on it. Her gaze seemed to be frozen as she stared at the photo. It was a selfie of Zhao Ku and Rong Lei. Both of them were naked and they were doing it. She did not believe it. She did not believe it. Pei Chi, this must be a composite, right? Rong Lei would never know a bitch like Zhao Ku. Zhou Meilin stood up immediately. Her fingers gripped the barbed wire so tightly that she almost bled. Pei Chi looked at her coldly as she struggled. She looked as if she would rather die than live. At that moment, she felt a little elated. Zhou Meilin, are you in pain now? You were betrayed by Rong Lei. You're in pain. You'd rather die than live. But when you hurt Dad like that, did you think about the relationship between husband and wife? She did not need to ask. She already knew the truth. It was Zhao Ku. Everything was planned by Zhao Ku. Zhou Meilin was just carrying the false reputation. But this is also the punishment she deserved. Pei Chi took a step back. Pei Chi, it was that bastard who framed me. Zhou Meilin fell to the ground and shouted hoarsely, I want to kill that bitch Zhao Ku. She looked up at Pei Chi and grabbed the barbed wire again. You'll help me, won't you? Pei Chi laughed coldly. Auntie, no one can help you. Don't you think you deserve this? That's what you deserve. Zhou Meilin was stunned. Her old face was covered in tears. Pei Chi turned around and walked towards the door. She paused for a moment. From the day you gave me to Mr. Zhong, from the moment I stepped into Tang Yu's room, you were wrong. After she finished speaking, she quickly left the dark place. Zhou Meilin's cries could be heard behind her as she walked further and further away. When she went out and breathed in the fresh air, her nose still seemed to be filled with the smell of decay. He could almost hear Zhou Meilin crying. Pei Chi leaned against the car door and let out a long sigh. She took out 3 cigarettes from the car, lit them, and stuck them into the dirt. She squatted in the direction of Pei Mingyi's grave and murmured, Dad. Zhou Meilin got what she deserved. After that, it was Zhao Ku's turn. She harmed Jinrong and killed Lin Yun's child. The law was too light to punish her. Pei Chi knew how to make Zhao Ku feel worse. Losing the title of Mrs. Tang would probably make Zhao Ku feel worse than death. Pei Chi closed her eyes. Just like Zhao Ku said, they were not destined to be mother and daughter in this life. They were destined to be enemies. After a while, the prison warden suddenly walked out. Seeing that Pei Chi was still there, he sighed in relief and said, Zhou Meilin has gone crazy. Pei Chi was stunned. She looked down and said, I'll pay for her medical expenses. Take good care of her. She took out a card and handed it to the prison warden. Call me if it's not enough. She wanted Zhou Meilin to live because her dad didn't want to see her. Chapter 359. It was already night time when Pei Chi returned to the city. It was the 4th day of the first lunar month, and the streets were busier than usual. Pedestrians walked to and fro, making her look even more lonely. While waiting for the traffic lights, young men and women would occasionally point at her car and laugh. As more and more people laughed, Pei Chi remembered that this car had been criticized badly. She thought that she would take the company's car to the hotel tomorrow. This car really didn't look good. Later, she went to the Pei Corporation's building. There was only one security guard on duty during the new year. When he saw Pei Chi, he quickly stood up. Boss Pei. Pei Chi smiled faintly. I'm just here to take a look. Do what you need to do. The security guard hesitated for a moment before asking carefully, Boss Pei, are you really moving the company away? Pei Chi smiled faintly. That's right. Actually, given Pei Corporation's current situation, We don't need such an expensive place." How could she not know that if she sold this piece of land, she would probably not be able to buy it back? However, she needed the money. The shareholders of Pay Corporation had been surging in secret. Her father only had 38% of the shares. If one day, these people waited for an opportunity to make a move, she would really be powerless. Instead of waiting for that day, she might as well start and make use of their greed. Pei Chi knew that this was cutting her own flesh, but she had no other choice. The security guard did not say anything else. He followed his duty and let Pei Chi walk in. Pei Corporation was not big. It seemed to have a few hundred employees and occupied a separate building. There was also a staff rest area. Added together, it was not big or small. However, in the center of B City, it was really considered very expensive. She walked to the office and sat in the place where she had been sitting for a long time. After a long time, she finally packed up her things, not only her things, but also Pei Mingyi's things. When she left, she stood at the door with a layer of tears in her eyes and slowly closed the door. When the lights were on, she carried the paper box and put it in the car. She actually felt like she did not know where to go. The phone beside her rang. She looked down and saw that it was Little One. "Boss Pei, don't forget to go to the Pearl Hotel tomorrow night. I went to confirm again today. The venue has been set up. I've hired a slightly famous host, but it's a little expensive." Little One felt that it was quite a pity. Old Mr. Pei had been reluctant to sell this piece of land back when he was around. Now that Boss Pei was here, he would not have reached this stage if it had not been too difficult. Pei Chi acknowledged. "Thank you, Little One. Why are you thanking me? I'm Boss Pei's secretary. These are my duties." "What's more, I'm getting paid overtime," Little One said sincerely. She felt that Pei Chi was actually a good boss. Compared to old Mr. Pei, he might not be as easy to talk to, but he gave her a glimmer of hope. Of course, there was still a long way to go. It wasn't something that could be accomplished in a short period of time. She thought about it and said, "Even if the company moves, I'll still be your secretary. I'm alone anyway, so I can go anywhere." Pei Chi smiled faintly. "Okay, see you tomorrow." "That's right. I've already prepared the gown. You can just change in the lounge," Little One added as she recalled something. Pei Chi sighed in her heart. She actually had to wear an evening gown to sell her family's inheritance. Chapter 360. In the lounge of Mingzhu Hotel, Pei Chi looked at herself in the mirror, a little stunned. She was selling land, but now it seemed like she was showing off her looks. She did not know that Little One had prepared such an outfit for her. It was a black knee-length dress, and the style was so simple that it couldn't be any simpler. There was a hollowed-out square collar, and the front was not too revealing. The back only revealed her shoulder blades, and the skirt was knee-length, however. The two tender lotus root-like arms, the neck, and the large snow-white skin on her back were all smooth and charming under the light. Fortunately, her long black hair was draped over her back, blocking some of the bright colors. However, those two tender legs challenged a man's self-control, making one's imagination run wild just by looking at them. Her entire appearance could only be described with one word: fragrant, soft, and creamy. Little One was also stunned. She had always known that Pei Chi was very beautiful, but when she wore such a gown, she could actually be so beautiful. She was fantasizing in her heart. In the past, when Mr. Tang faced Boss Pei and both of them were lying on the same bed, did he still need to sleep? Little Wen's fingers couldn't help but touch it. Wow, it felt so good. Pei Chi only had light makeup on her face. Her long eyelashes were dense and curled like midnight, and her red lips were a natural lip color as if they were moisturized. They were so fragrant and soft that one wanted to eat them up in one bite. Little One thought in her heart that Boss Pei would probably be worth more than that piece of land if he stood out like that. However, she didn't dare to say that out loud. Pei Chi looked at her and said lightly, "Let's go." Little One was also wearing a small black gown, and she was a little restrained. She pulled her clothes and followed Pei Chi out. Of course, they weren't fighting alone. A few of the young middle-level members of the Pei Corporation were also pulled over to strengthen their aura. When they walked into the auction hall, the lights were a little dim, but one could still see that the decorations were quite meticulous. The organizers like to play these games. I heard that this is based on psychology. In such an environment, the hormones in the kidneys will rise rapidly. If you're not careful, you'll raise the sign. Xiaowen lowered her voice and whispered into Pei Qiqi's ear. Pei Qiqi glanced at her. Is the hormone for this? Xiaowen laughed dryly. More or less. More or less. The two of them sat down in their seats. At this time, almost everyone had arrived. The lights were dim, so not many people noticed Pei Qiqi. But who was this host? How could a very good host in B City let go of the auction house? First, he said something funny and then instructed the lights to look for Pei Qiqi. Let's see where the beautiful boss Pei is. Please cooperate with the lights. Pei Qiqi felt a little uncomfortable sitting there. The handsome male host had already started speaking. Now, let's welcome Boss Pei on stage to make a beautiful opening for tonight's auction. There was a round of applause, and then the host personally came down. He reached his hand out to Pei Qiqi, acting like a gentleman. Pei Qiqi didn't want to brush him off. She had no choice but to put her hand on his wrist and walk up to the stage together. The lights were bright enough. She stood there, glowing white and soul-stirring. Then, the host said the same thing that Little One was thinking. If I didn't know that the land on Shangxin Road was being auctioned today, I would have thought that the beautiful Boss Pei would be auctioned tonight. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.